A major new data breach that compromised nearly every social security number. A gaping vulnerability in Pixel phones that has been there for years. Some exciting updates from some popular FOSS projects, and much more. Welcome to Surveillance Report 191, where we are dedicated to keeping you private and secure with the latest news from the past week. I am Nathan, recording from an undisclosed secret bunker.
And I'm Henry from Techlore.
If you would like to support this podcast and help keep us going, we have several ways to do that. We have Patreon, where for $5 a month, you can ask us a question for our Q&A, or you can also join our Signal group, or do both, of course. The group is growing, and we are very happy to have all of you who have joined so far. Thank you, and we look forward to having more of you. For $10 a month or more, you get an extended version of the podcast with more of our analysis, opinions, etc., and you don't have to listen to any promo segments or sponsor segments like this. If you are not a fan of Patreon, we totally understand. We have LibrePay, which is open source, a little bit more privacy respecting, but of course the most private and anonymous way to support us is Monero. We don't know anything about you, but we do see the contributions and we appreciate you. With that, we'll launch into our highlight story. This one has really made the rounds. I've seen this one on mainstream news outlets and stuff like that. National Public Data has confirmed a breach exposing social security numbers. So it's not just social security numbers. The company states that the data may have included names, email addresses, phone numbers, and postal addresses in addition to SSNs. The leak started after a threat actor in April, using the alias USDOD, offered to sell for $3.5 million 2.9 billion records allegedly stolen from NPD. And I think we actually covered this on a previous surveillance report, so this is kind of an update. Earlier this month, another threat actor shared for free the most comprehensive variant of the database with 2.7 billion records, with multiple records referring to a single person. So in other words, there were multiple details per person. It could include social, phone number, name. It's unclear how many individuals are impacted, but multiple people confirmed to Bleeping Computer that the records included details about them as well as their family members, including deceased ones. According to Troy Hunt, who runs Have I Been Pwned, there were 134 million unique email addresses in one version of the leaked database that he analyzed. Not all the information may be accurate, though. Tests from Bleeping Computer showed some people were associated with someone else's name. And then they cited a couple more examples. Inaccuracies aside, the NPD incident has led to at least one class action lawsuit against Jericho Pictures, the entity that operates the NPD service. NPD is believed to source their details from public files such as government records, which include all legal papers related to an individual. My take on this is, it seems like the scale of this is really what's kind of surprising people. For those of you just tuning in, this is nothing new. We see a lot of data breaches. I sent the story to several of my friends and family, and one of them actually wrote back. He's like, oh yeah, we weren't caught up in this. And I'm like, okay, it doesn't matter because we cover a data breach that includes social security number, I'd say probably at least every other month on average. For those of you just joining us, freeze your credit. It's totally free, at least in the US. It does not stop your credit score from changing. That's a common misconception I hear. It's very easy to unfreeze. It lasts forever. There's really no reason not to do it, to be honest. And especially for your kids, because if you have kids, nobody's going to see their credit score for, 15, 20 years until they start using their credit. So if it gets stolen, nobody's going to catch it for a long time.
Yeah, well, a couple things. I likewise also received a link to npd.pentester.com. And actually, it does work. I did try it out. I don't think tools like this are actually the worst thing for normies to just very obviously see that they were caught in a data breach and actually see the last four of their SSN listed on a website. I think it's very different when you actually see the data. So I think there's actually some legitimate value in tools like this for actually making people understand what data is caught in these breaches and how it does directly impact them. It's a very unfortunate data breach, but like Nate said, this isn't something we don't see very frequently. I think it's just kind of, like Nate said, the scale of this one that's definitely going to catch people off guard. A family member of mine texted me about this on Signal and asked, some of their friends asked them what to do, and they asked me, do you have a checklist of things that I can share with people? And I pretty much said, I'll share the checklist. I said it's going to depend on the person and their goals, but generally one is freezing credit, which is the biggest one. Setting up accounts with the credit bureaus so people can't claim those accounts on behalf of you. But if you freeze your credit, you probably already do that. Enabling 2FA on all accounts that support it. Aliasing things like emails, phones, and card transactions whenever possible. use a password manager to have better passwords and also help with the aliasing, because a lot of password managers will include aliasing tools. And then I also put, if address is a concern, the only real option is to get a shipping mailbox somewhere so your address isn't caught up in this stuff. Even then, the DMV is kind of its own separate issue that gets into legal territory if you don't use your residential address. So those were kind of the takeaways I gave to this family member, and I think it's pretty applicable to anybody listening. As kind of the core places to start and to share with people you know. And I think some of these things, like aliasing, are a pretty easy sell when you can actually sell the non-privacy benefits that go along with it, like being able to stop spam in your email inbox, being able to give crappy phone numbers to people who creep you out, who ask for a phone number, or you just don't want spam in your phone number inbox, or anything like that. And also separating transactions for your cards, stopping subscriptions when you no longer need them. Try to also sell those things as well when you cover those services.
I also, in case anybody didn't write that down fast enough and for some reason doesn't want to rewind, as this is a pre-recorded podcast, on my website, thenewoil.org, if you scroll down to the bottom where I have the quick start guides, the very first one is identity theft. I would definitely condense it for your loved ones because this actually links out to separate pages on the website. But it kind of says the same stuff you just did. Freeze your credit, use payment masking services like privacy.com, secure your online accounts. And so that'll take you to like the password manager, 2FA pages, remove your data from public search websites, because, that can be used to like guess the answers to credit questions. Because credit questions are always like, what street are you associated with? Or like, what car did you get a car loan for? What bank? And like, these are all things that people can find online. And then plant your flag, was in there too. Lots of resources, although I do like the idea of a very simple checklist. I think that's something I would love to do someday, is just make like checklists for different things.
There actually is an external resource I do really enjoy that's on the Techlore resources in the bottom, and it's the Consumer Reports Security Planner. Pretty much it's a short, I think it's a 3 or 4 question quiz. It pretty much asks, what devices do you own? There's like 10 different things. You just click the ones you own. It says like MacBook or Windows laptop, etc. And then the next question is, what do you care about protecting yourself from? One of which is identity theft. And then the third thing is like, have you suffered from any of the following before? And then based on that, it actually gives you a checklist of things to deal with the concerns that you have. And it's very thorough. It's very well done. And a lot of it's very evidence-based. They link to research. And I actually really align with a lot of their recommendations. So I did it assuming this exact scenario earlier today. So I said, I want to protect from identity theft and et cetera. And the first thing is like locking down your credit file. So freezing your credit, opening accounts, and then the next things were like keep your operating systems and your computer up to date, etc. Kind of the basics for people, which is really important for them. And it's very approachable. It's very presentable. It's a very good resource, I think, for people you know. We don't normally have a data breach as the highlight story, but we're going to head into the data breach section, which is kind of a rare transition we don't normally do. 3 a.m. ransomware stole data of almost 500,000 Kootenai health patients. So this is a not-for-profit healthcare provider in Idaho. They operate the largest hospital in the region, offering a wide range of medical services, including emergency care, surgery, cancer treatment, cardiac care, and orthopedics. This included full names, date of births, SSNs, like we talk about, it happens a lot, driver's license, government ID numbers, medical record numbers, medical treatment and condition information, medical diagnoses, and medical insurance information as well.
FlightAware has exposed pilots and users' info. For the record, this article is paywalled now, and I swear it wasn't paywalled the other day when I looked at it, so all I could get was the first paragraph. They expose users' personal and professional information, included physical address, what aircraft they own, pilot status, and what flights they view.
Next is companies, and we're going to talk about Google here, who has released Gemini AI on Android, but they're saying that they're going to take a privacy-minded approach to the integration of AI features on Android devices, implementing end-to-end encryption to secure data in transit, while keeping the most sensitive data locally on the device. The Gemini AI-powered features on Android operates on both on-device and in the cloud, depending on the task's complexity and privacy requirements. Like simple tasks that involve sensitive information can be handled directly on lighter models called Gemini Nano, which also work offline, and then more complex things go to Google's cloud infrastructure, which is then sent back to the user. Key points in achieving this is they say no third parties, on-device AI, secure cloud infrastructure, and user control. So users can manage Gemini interactions by reviewing, pinning, or deleting chats and controlling app responses when the device is locked. And they also say that they've developed some privacy-preserving technologies like sealed computing, which processes sensitive data in a secure cloud enclave, keeping it private even from Google. They're also saying that Android's binary transparency allows verification of operating system code and ensures the integrity of software running in secure environments. There's a more detailed white paper on Google's end-to-end data protection about Gemini AI that it's going to publish. So there's more technical details that will be made available soon for us to be able to pick it apart to see if there's any easy to find reason why this is not as privacy respecting as they claim it is.
Microsoft is enabling BitLocker device encryption by default on Windows 11. In Windows 11 version 24H2, Microsoft is reducing the hardware requirements for automatic device encryption, opening it up to many more devices, including ones running the home version of Windows 11. For those not aware, BitLocker is Microsoft's proprietary full disk encryption software, and up until now, it's only been available for the more paid versions of Windows. So like, like Office and Professional or something like that, but not Home, which is like probably 90% of people. Sucks to suck. Device encryption no longer requires hardware security test interface or modern standby, and encryption will also be enabled even if untrusted direct memory access buses and interfaces are detected. So the latest Windows 11 version 24H2 update comes pre-installed on Microsoft's range of Copilot Plus PCs, is expected to be available on existing machines in late September. That means if you clean install Windows 11 later this year or buy a new PC with 24H2 installed, BitLocker device encryption will be enabled by default. If you simply upgrade, Microsoft won't enable it automatically. They said you can avoid it if you're using a local account on a clean install. When you first set up a new machine and log in, you will be prompted to sign in with a Microsoft account to finish encrypting the device. BitLocker can still be manually enabled using the control panel on local accounts, though. You can also disable device encryption through a toggle in privacy and security on the Windows 11 settings.
Research. We're going to go with all Google Pixel phones. Nearly all of them were exposed by an unpatched flaw in a hidden Android app. So this is not citing the original research. So this is actually an article done about the research. Just keep that context in mind. So researchers from the mobile device security firm iVerify published these findings that in every Android release for Pixel since September of 2017 could expose the devices to manipulation and takeover. This is due to a software package called showcase.apk that runs on the system level and lurks invisible to users. It's pretty much put there by cell companies like Verizon as a mechanism for putting phones into a store demo mode, but it's not Google software. For whatever reason, it's been in every Android release for Pixel and has deep system privileges, including remote code execution and remote software installation. Even riskier, the application is designed to download a configuration file over an unencrypted HTTP web connection that researchers say could be hijacked by an attacker to take control of the app and then the whole device, essentially. So iVerify disclosed these findings to Google at the beginning of May, and the tech giant has not yet released a fix for the issue, but they said that the Showcase is no longer being used by Verizon, and Android will remove Showcase from all supported Pixel devices with a software update in the coming weeks. So they will be getting this fixed soon. They also added that Google has not seen evidence of active exploitation and that the app is not present in the new Pixel 9 series devices that Google just announced. This was actually discovered because of Palantir, who's an iVerify customer. They say that the discovery and what they describe as Google's slow, opaque response has prompted them to phase out not just Pixel phones, but all Android devices across the company. iVerify points out that while Showcase represents a concerning exposure for Pixel devices, it is turned off by default. This means that an attacker would first need to turn the application on in a target's device before being able to exploit it. And the most straightforward way to do this would be to have physical access to a victim's phone, as well as their system password or another exploitable vulnerability that would allow them to make changes to settings. They said they did not find any way to remotely enable it, though of course it could be a 0-day.
And also just to throw it out there, in case anyone's wondering, using I would imagine any custom OS, you are almost certainly do not have this. And our second research story says thousands of corporate secrets were left exposed. This guy found them all. This is kind of one of those stories that, and I don't mean this in a negative way, the narrative that the article told was kind of meandering, so I'm trying my best to consolidate this. But basically, this researcher found at least 15,000 developer secrets, which for those who don't know, those are like passwords, private keys, like SSH keys, API tokens, like things like that generally only certain people should have access to. He found at least 15,000 developer secrets hard-coded into software, which means they can't be changed without updating the software. He found hundreds of username and password details linked to Nebraska's Supreme Court and its IT systems, the details needed to access Stanford University Slack channels, and more than 1,000 API keys belonging to OpenAI customers. A major smartphone manufacturer, customers of a fintech company, and a multi-billion-dollar cybersecurity company are counted among the thousands of organizations that inadvertently expose secrets. As part of his efforts to stem the tide, The researcher hacked together a way to automatically get the details revoked, making them useless to any attackers. In a second strand to the research, he also scanned data sources to find 66,000 websites with dangling subdomain issues, making them vulnerable to various attacks, including hijacking. Some of the world's biggest websites, including a development domain owned by the New York Times, had weaknesses. While the two security issues he looked into are well known among researchers, he says that turning to unconventional datasets, which are usually reserved for other purposes, allow thousands of issues to be identified en masse, and, if expanded, offers the potential to help protect the web at large. The goal has, and this is a quote from him, the goal has been to find ways to discover trivial vulnerability classes at scale. I think there's a gap for creative solutions.
Now we're going to go into politics, and we're going to start with some decent news. So, Federal Appeals Court finds geofence warrants are categorically unconstitutional. They pretty much said it's prohibited by the Fourth Amendment, and they found that geofence warrants constitute the sort of general exploratory rummaging that the drafters of the Fourth Amendment intended to outlaw. This was from the Supreme Court's landmark ruling in Carpenter v. United States, where individuals have a reasonable expectation of privacy in the location data implicated by geofence warrants. For those who don't know, geofence warrants are essentially when a law enforcement official goes to Google and says, hey, a crime happened in this area, so we need everybody's location data who was in the area at the time of the crime. And it pretty much grabs data from a lot of people who weren't even suspected of a crime. And they don't really know when it happens, and Google typically has to comply with this. They said in the court that geofence warrants require a provider, almost always Google, to search the entirety of its reserve of location data, while law enforcement officials have no idea who they're looking for, or whether the search will even turn up a result. Therefore, the problem with these warrants is that they never include a specific user to be identified, which is constitutionally insufficient.
So this next story, we're not going to get into the political aspect of it, but it does concern cybersecurity, so we will discuss it. It's two parts. The first part comes from Politico. It says, we received internal Trump documents from quote-unquote Robert. Then the campaign confirmed it was hacked. So, quoting the article, the campaign blamed, quote, foreign sources hostile to the United States, citing a Microsoft report on Friday that Iranian hackers sent a spear-phishing email in June to high-ranking official on the presidential campaign. Microsoft did not identify the campaign targeted by the email and declined to comment. Politico has not independently verified the identity of the hacker or their motivation, and a Trump campaign spokesperson, Stephen Chung, declined to say if they had further information substantiating the campaign's suggestion that it was targeted. On July 22nd, Politico began receiving emails from an anonymous account. Over the course of the past few weeks, the person, who used an AOL email account and identified themselves only as Robert, relayed what appeared to be internal communications from a senior Trump campaign official. A research dossier the campaign had apparently done on Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, was dated February 23rd and was included in the documents. The documents are authentic according to two people familiar with them and granted anonymity. The dossier was a 271-page document based on publicly available information about Vance's past record and statements, with some, such as his past criticisms of Trump, identified in the documents as, quote, potential vulnerabilities. The person also sent part of a research document about Florida Senator Marco Rubio, who was also a finalist for the vice presidential nomination. When asked how they obtained the documents, the person responded, quote, I suggest you don't be curious about where I got them from. Any answer to this question will compromise me and also legally restricts you from publishing them. Part 2 comes from The Hill. And it says the FBI is investigating after the Trump campaign says it was hacked. So a Friday report from Microsoft pinned the blame for the hack on Iran, declining at the time to identify the Trump campaign as the target.
The FTC has finalized a rule that bans fake reviews, including those made with AI. They announced this Wednesday, and it's pretty much going to tackle several types of fake reviews and prohibit marketers from using deceptive practices like AI-generated reviews, censoring honest negative reviews, and compensating third parties for positive reviews. This was actually a very rare 5-0 vote. The new rule will start being enforced 60 days after it's published in the official government publication called Federal Register. You can read the finalized rule online, but they're also going to include the summary below if you want to check that out in the show notes.
Texas is suing General Motors, saying it tricked customers into sharing driving data sold to insurers. The lawsuit was filed on Tuesday over years of alleged abuse of customers' data and trust. New car owners were presented with a confusing and highly misleading process that was implied to be for their safety, but, quote, was no more than a deceptively designed sales flow, unquote, that surrendered their data for GM to sell. The suit contends that at no point was selling driving data ever even suggested as a possibility, putting GM in violation of the state's consumer protection laws. Texas AG Ken Paxton is seeking a jury trial and at least $10,000 per offense, aka every GM car sold in the state since 2015, And he also wants an add-on of $250,000 in cases where the victim was over 65.
This is an update to a story last week. So Elon Musk's ex Twitter targeted with 9 privacy complaints after grabbing EU users' data for training Grok. So we covered this a little bit last week, but essentially they enabled data sharing by default without letting users consent or do anything like that, which is awesome. And then the DPC has already taken actions against this, but then Noib, which we've covered in the past as well, who does a lot of activism, say that the actions thus far are insufficient, pointing out there's no way for X users to get the company to delete already ingested data. So they filed GDPR complaints in Ireland and 7 other countries, and the complaints argue that Zitter does not have a valid basis for using the data of some 60 million people in the EU to train AIs without obtaining their consent.
With that, we'll move into the free and open source software news. Introducing Proton Duo, unlimited privacy for 2. This includes 1 terabyte of storage space. You both get to enjoy your own encrypted email address, calendar, secure storage for files, photos, and passwords, and a VPN. For a limited time only, we are offering Proton Duo for only $14.99 a month with a 1-year plan. That's $60 in annual savings. This is a forever discount. So if you sign up for the promotion, you'll keep this price forever. So again, the highlights: 2 users, 1 terabyte of storage, 15 gigs of bonus storage every year, everything that's in Proton Unlimited, and full access to mail, drive, calendar, pass, and VPN.
The next story is from SimpleX, which is the messenger that has end-to-end encryption and some other nice things that go along with it. But they got an investment from Jack Dorsey and Asymmetric, with version 6.0 released and a new user experience and private message routing. So this is a big one just because they combine so much into one blog. So we're going to do our best to unpack this. So first, they got a ton of funds. They raised $1.3 million pre-seed, which was led by Jack Dorsey with participation of Asymmetric Capital Partners, which is a VC fund. Now, to settle concerns that lots of people, including myself, have, they say that the support enables them to make huge product improvements thanks to a bigger team and provide them with a medium-term funding to get to the next stage of product and business evolution. Like with Village Global, which I believe was a previous amount of VC funding they got, this is a financial investment without control or board seat provisions, so the users can be certain that SimpleX remains true to their vision of privacy-first communication. Trail of Bits, this is an update. Trail of Bits is the same people behind iVerify, completed the protocol's design security review and will be doing implementation security review in the end of the year, and they're going to publish their first report soon. They're also going to launch long-form email-like messaging on SimpleX Network later this year, together with optional short public addresses that show the profile you're connecting to them before the connection. Last but not least, they started working with Heather Meeker, which is a legal expert on IP matters and one of the earliest advocates of open source software, to set up open source governance model to some extent similar to how Matrix did it. So they're kind of trying to emulate Matrix here. They also said the private message routing they announced before is now enabled for all users by default, which protects users' IP addresses and sessions from destination servers. Some other minor updates: they connect to contacts faster now. There's no new one-handed interface. You can archive contacts with reminders to chat later, new ways to start chats, new themes, group moderation tools, sharing, networking, and battery improvements, and more.
This last FOSS story is actually really super quick. The headline pretty much says it all. It says Ubuntu will start shipping with the latest upstream Linux kernel, even release candidates. That'll take us into our Misfits, and this last one is also kind of quick, I think. The first post-quantum cryptography standards are officially here. On Tuesday, the U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, published the first set of standards for post-quantum cryptography. So we have ML-KEM, originally known as Crystal's Kyber, ML-DSA, previously known as Crystal's Dilithium, and SLH-DSA, initially submitted as Sphinx Plus. For many companies, this also means that now is the time to start implementing these algorithms. So the ML-KEM algorithm is somewhat similar to the kind of public-private encryption methods used today to establish a secure channel between 2 servers, for example. At its core, it uses a lattice system and purposely generated errors that researchers say will be very hard to solve even for a quantum computer. ML-DSA, on the other hand, uses a somewhat similar scheme to generate its keys, but is all about creating and verifying digital signatures. SLH-DSA is also all about creating digital signatures, but is based on a different mathematical foundation to do so. All right, so that was everything this week. A little bit of a quieter week, but still plenty of news. You know, we had that data breach from MPD that compromised a lot of people's social security numbers. And even if you weren't caught up in this one, again, people, please freeze your credit. We had that vulnerability in Pixel phones, which was pretty shocking, but thankfully is pretty limited and will be fixed soon. And again, exciting updates from Proton and SimpleX, a lot of promising stuff going on there, much, much more. So as always, stay subscribed and we will keep you updated on stories as we hear them. If you would like to keep this podcast going, we still have Patreon, $5 a month. You get to join our Signal chat if you want to. You don't have to, but it's an option. So reminder on that note, if you join the chat, you need to message us, DM us, and tell us your display name so that we can go ahead and verify it's you. For $10 a month or more, you get an extended version of this podcast with more of our thoughts and opinions, more of our analysis. If you are not a fan of Patreon and you don't care about the perks, we have LibrePay, which is open source and just recurring. So that's the nice thing there. Again, no perks, but you don't have to think about it. And for the most privacy and security, we have Monero, which you do have to think about, but we don't see anything about you. We do see the contributions, and we thank all of you for supporting us. Thank you again for listening to the Surveillance Report. Links to all of the stories can be found in the show notes. And if you have a story you think we should cover, please send it to news@surveillancereport.tech. The final thing we want to ask is please share the podcast around. We also have the Surveillance Clips channel if you just want to share some individual stories. Make sure you're subscribed. Give us a rating if you're on a platform where that's an option. I'm told, I don't know if we're ever going to do any live shows, but I'm told that's what people look for, like promoters, when you're trying to book a show. So go ahead and leave us a rating now, and if we ever do, that'll be helpful. We're trying to reach as many people as possible with the message of privacy, and you can help us do that. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next week.